Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Hopefully guys you're doing well. Thanks for joining today. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I wanted to spend some time to talk about making excellent scenes in the countryside. So if you know anything about railroading, you know that trains ship things from A to B. And in order to get to or from A to B, they have to go through the countryside. And countryside scenes are an easy way to get some good space fillers on your route. They're also an easy way to get some cheap detail, as I like to call it, because it doesn't require a lot of work. So a couple things as you look through the clips here that you want to look for is first off, you want to have some variability in your fields. So when you're going to the countryside, it's not always going to be the same repetitive scene over and over and over. But also there's a few things we're going to look at with a little bit closer detail that are important but also easy to model. So these first few scenes here are just kind of showing you some of the different options you can have and some different things to look for. So first up here, we want to talk about things at the edge of fields. So at the edge of fields, you always have either grass or dirt. And this is especially true between the right-of-way, either the road or the railroad that you're modeling, and then the field itself. But then also you can have fields that have crops in them, like this one has some wheat in it. You can also have fields that are empty or fields that are just growing grass for hay. But another thing that's important is when you have roads going between fields, you want to make sure that you line those roads with grass. It's very rare that a crop will come right up to the edge of the road. There's usually at least a few feet of grass on one side or the other. And then the next thing to consider about the countryside is when you have roads come together, it's always a good idea to make small scenes like this. Create some sort of contrast with the typical thing. So either a height difference, or instead of a bunch of fields, put in some rock outcroppings or a little small forest. Something just to kind of emphasize that point, because where those two roads come together, that's a significant location on your route. So I like to put in some gas stations, some auto service facilities, things like that. Stuff you might see, where two decent sized roads come together out in the countryside. And then when you are far away from the track, there's no need to add some of those finer details. So here, we can see that we have some differences in our fields, separated by some grass and a few token trees and bushes. But this is about a quarter mile away from the track. When you're driving, at 40, 50 miles an hour, you're not going to notice the fact that, a quarter mile away, it's missing some details. So this is an easy way to get the idea and the concept or the representation of there being diversity without actually having to put any major detail in there. Now, of course, the story is different when you're close to the track, like in this scene. Here we have a creek side. You can see there's a ton of detail here. And this is extremely important for a good rural scene to make sure that your details next to the track are pristine, they're top quality, they're full, and you have lots of good things to look at as you drive by. So here with these creeks, you'll notice that the edges of the creeks are not just lined up with grass, but rather there's a lot of trees and bushes. In my opinion, you can go look at pretty much any creek there is out there and you'll see this. You'll see that the edges of the creeks are always lined with trees and bushes because that stuff doesn't ever get mowed. And this one especially is a good scene because you can't actually see where the shoreline is. And that's really how it looks in real life, especially in areas that are full of farmland. Maybe not in the cities, but this is just a good look for things that are out in the countryside and not being touched by mowers and machinery and things like that. Easy details you can add just to kind of bring things alive. And then instead of having crops, you can always have animals. If you're going to have animals, you need to have some grass in the field. It needs to make it obvious that it's a field for grazing. But the nice thing about fields for cattle and different livestock is they don't have to be flat. They can be really hilly and kind of weird shaped, and you can use the fields that don't really fit in as good fields for crops. You can use those as fields for livestock. And here you can see kind of a bit of everything. So we've got some good detail on the track side. We've got some livestock in the background. You've got a hay field. You've got a crop field on the left. And then here in the foreground, you've got just some wild grass because that field isn't planted at all. And that's a really good combination of kind of all the elements together. Plus, one thing we haven't mentioned yet is elevation change. And when you have rural countryside scenes, you always need to make sure you have some elevation change or some small ponds or some creeks, things that give contrast to the typical crop field like you see here. But once again, you can see even this road, we have some wild grass on the side before you get to the crops. That's a crucial detail that's easy to implement, doesn't take a lot of time. And also, if you notice in the background of all these scenes, you're never seeing the edge of the route. You always see trees or a tree line or a hilltop. If you go drive in the countryside, you'll see the same thing. You'll look off to the edge and all you'll see is either hilltops or treetops. And It's really nice kind of how that serves as a view block. Same thing on your routes here. So pay attention to those closer details next to the track. And don't forget that, when you have fence lines along the track or places where birds can prop up, they're going to let go of some seeds, if you know what I mean. And those seeds eventually become trees or bushes and things like that. And that's a lot of the reason why rights of way have trees and bushes growing along the side. And don't forget to take the opportunity to have some fields that are just fallow, meaning that they don't have any crops or any grass or anything that they're growing. They're just left out to just be natural. That's important too. And here I want to talk about what I call cookie cutter farms. So in order to help you fill space on your route, you can kind of make some pre-sized farms and then just kind of copy and paste. So with the little farm plot that you just saw in the previous scene, I pretty much use that same farm plot to fill up all of the area you see in this scene and in the next few scenes. And it's kind of nice because it makes it very easy to move forward with filling in territory quickly, but also by rotating it, by mixing it up, adding some variability, it kind of hides the fact that it's actually the same scene every single time. But here we go with about 3 miles here of the exact same concept, just rotated that same little farm plot. And when you're driving at 40 miles an hour, you're just never going to notice because it's enough variability. And here we see some good change in elevation. Elevation change is good, especially elevation above the track level. We're all pretty good at, making things lower than the track level and having bridges on our track and whatnot. But it's also important to have things that go above the track level too, with cuts and whatnot. And here we go again. Another thing to look for is, of course, foliage along the side of the track, but also changes in elevation in the track itself. Just because you're going through the countryside, if it's not mountains, that doesn't mean it's flat. So here you can see a gentle increase in the elevation as you look toward the horizon. And same thing in the previous scene. And then now, of course, in the scene that we're about to pull up here in just a second, you can see a really sharp decrease. That's about a 2.5% drop right there, which is a pretty good clip. But, when it's short like this, it doesn't really affect your locomotive or your train too much. But it's incredible how much detail just a change in elevation adds. And then, of course, your small towns, you want to have those littered out throughout the place on your route, places to go, places of activity. And when you get to those places, you want to make sure that you have roads along the track and places for cars to go. And you want to make sure that there's a, reasonable level of detail there to create some areas of focus. But also don't forget that you can run trains through the countryside, through the forest as well. It doesn't always have to be farmland. I know that we love farmland and farmland looks great, but trains also run through the forest as well. And you can use forest to kind of break up different areas or towns or just different areas of farmland even, just to break up scenes, kind of like you see here. So running through forests is crucial. And then the last thing to talk about is, creating some moderately detailed homesteads for people for their farms. You don't have to create more than probably 4 or 5 kind of unique homesteads. And then you can really just copy and paste those to your different farms. And if you give enough variability, you'll never notice in passing that, oh yeah, that's the same homestead I saw a couple miles back, because you're just not going to notice. That's the beauty of impression. You're just creating the impression that the detail is there without having to actually paste all of the detail. So it's all about impressions. But keep in mind that, along fence lines and along roads, there's going to be grass. Between fields, there's going to be grass or dirt. And, if you keep that in mind and add some bushes and trees and some small homesteads, you really have like 90% of it done right there. And then you can make nice, pretty scenes like this. So thanks for joining today. Hopefully this helps you as you guys build some real scenes, and stay tuned for more videos. We'll catch you next time.